everyone to Close to Broke. Today is a really special episode as we embark on our 150th episode. I didn't know what exactly to do for this episode. I was in between a couple ideas. After long thought, I think the only video we could possibly do is our biggest pot we've ever played. And spoiler alert, we don't play a single pot under 10,000 USD dollar mark. 100,000 would have been crazy. I think actually if you add all these pots up, we're well over 100,000. I'm really excited to put together today's episode. This episode goes beyond just the Close to Broke stuff. There's a ton to go over. So, without further ado, I just want to give a big thank you to Trenton as this is his art show. The very first hand of today's episode is going to be at the Maryland Live. It'll be a massive pot with a hand you would never expect to be playing a $10,000 pot.
Rounding out today's session, we have one of the most interesting hands we've played in a while. And you guys are going to want to buckle up because although this is the last hand, like they say, we saved the best for last. At this point, I'm just trying to wrap up the vlog. Like I said, we don't want to put up a vlog with like just a few hands. We've got to get as many hands as possible. And again, I've been just trying to mix it up. At this point, we look down at Five-Deuce of clubs, which is a pretty crappy hand, but I end up deciding to raise to $80. I don't know. This hand just seems to do good things for me. I don't know. We've won some pretty reasonable pots with it. There's no real excuse. At this point, I'm just trying to get hands for the vlog and mix it up. Unfortunately, the small blind has other plans as he decides to 3-bet to $225. The action folds over to me. This is a really puny 3-bet sizing, way too small, out of position. I think you've got to be going at least 3.5x from the small blind, I believe. The action back onto me, and considering we're both playing like 5,000 or 6,000 effective, the last thing I want to do is fold with millions of big blinds behind. Yes, it's a little spewy, sure, I guess, but in reality, I'm super deep against a player I have a really good read on and has been really good action. So why not give him some action back, right? That's the point of this. I make the call, and we're going to have this up to a flop that comes king 5-6 with a diamond and 2 hearts. Really, really wet board texture. What's a little more interesting is the opponent decides to check it over to me. At this point, I think that he can easily have ace queen, ace jack, a bunch of random holdings like that. So I end up taking over the betting reins and the betting lead in position and betting for $200. Equity denial is the purpose of this bet and the sole purpose of it. Unfortunately, he decides to make the call, looking for some improvement on the turn, which comes the deuce of diamonds. Yes, that now introduces a straight that was available on the flop, but a little, you know, that'd be a little ridiculous maybe to 3-bet 3-4. So when he decides to check it over to me, this is a really obvious spot for me to go for maximum value. I feel like I pretty much have the effect of nuts here unless I'm up against specifically pocket kings that are playing it slow. And the other big thing to note is there's now 2 massive draws out there, 2 flush draws available. So when the action checks over to me, I need to go massive here. I bet $900. Remember we did it earlier with the bluff. It's great to be able to do this with a value hand. And after a very brief moment, my opponent does the unthinkable and raises to $2,700. I don't even think he knew what he was raising to. He just grabbed a bunch of blacks, a tower of them, and pushed them out in the middle. I'm never going to fold here. Like I said, if you have pocket kings, GG's to you, sir. I didn't call with a 5-deuce to make 2-pair and fold on this board texture. So I end up jamming, having him covered. He has around 23 or 2,500 remaining. All in. What's going in the log? We're done now. All in. Yeah. Twice or once?
Once or twice.
Depending what you have. Now you show me your hand.
Then once.
What? What do you do?
One time.
That's not, that's not how you do it?
No.
No, you have to always be one.
Whatever you want. Twice is fine.
Okay. I have 2-pair.
On both?
Yeah.
Yeah, then you do 2 pairs good. Sick.
He ends up making the call. We agreed to run it twice after a little bit of negotiation. The first river card comes out of 3 of diamonds, which is just not fun, as it puts a 4-liner out there, as well as bringing the obvious diamond draw that was there on the turn. And the second one is even worse, as it comes the 9 of hearts. So 7-8 now makes a straight, and hearts get there. I show 5-deuce. He says that is pretty sick and ends up mucking. An unbelievable turn of events. I cannot believe my luck. What an amazing turn of events. 5-deuce, never lose. Isn't that what they say? With that concluding our last hand, I'd love to throw it over to me in person and see how I feel, because that was an unbelievably ridiculous session.
All right, so we are currently heading out of the art show, but we have another hand to go over.
Huron plays his biggest pot to date in the Bicycle Live private game.
That's exactly what happens. Let's throw it right over now.
Yet another bomb pot to break down, but this one is a really significant one. Again, it's probably been 5 hours or 6 hours since that massive bomb pot that we lost. So there's been quite a few that we've played that we've just, said goodbye to the $100 the bomb pot fee is for every single one of those pots. But this one is a big deal. Again, we're catching up on the flop, as that's how all bomb pots work. And the flop comes out King 7-4 on the top board and Queen Jack 7 on the bottom board. Outstanding flop for our specific hand as we look down at King Queen of clubs. We're here in early position, and I decided to lead out for $700. A pretty big bet sizing. Again, going around 70% of the pots. I got to start building a pot while we have pretty much the effective nuts. It feels like it is literally impossible for us to be losing both boards, I think, at this exact juncture. So we're betting big here. We're needing to get some calls. We get one caller from middle position, and then the opponent directly to his left, the pro, decides to make the call as well. We're going off to a turn card that comes an 8 of clubs on the top board, bringing us a backdoor flush draw, and a 4 of spades on the bottom board. So now we have a massive, massive hand with even more equity as we now pick up an even bigger draw. At this point, it's time to ramp up the aggression and get as much money as I can while I'm ahead in. I decide to bet $2,000. The effective stack is going to be my opponent in between myself and the last act opponent, who has somewhere in the vicinity of a 5,500 behind. He decides to make the call, leaving himself around 3K, and the last act player pretty quickly folds. We're going off to a river, hoping to improve or at least hold. The top river comes the Queen of Diamonds, improving us to 2 pair, and the bottom river comes the Jack of Spades, improving us to 2 pair as well. Although a Jack is probably never folding now, again, it's very unlikely, nearly impossible for me to be losing both of these boards. So if that's the case, I've got to make as much pressure as I can to maybe fold out a slightly better hand on one of the boards, or what's more likely is get max value against a hand that just can't think that I'm shipping both boards, because I have pretty much the best possible hand you can have in this instance. I decide to jam it all in, about $3,000 for my opponent, who goes deep into the tank. This is by far the longest tank we've ever had on the vlog. I think this gentleman ends up tanking for over 5 minutes before eventually making the call. We show our hand. He says that is good, and we ship a monstrous pot. Well over one of these. Let me do the math real quick. That's like 10,000 right there. 21, 12, 12,000. Shipping a pot of over $13,000. This is something that movies are written about. If there was ever Rocky Balboa film for a poker player, maybe this is our film. We were down tens of thousands of dollars, and we found a way to battle back to nearly a break-even session. What is going on?
Okay, our day continues on. As you guys have seen now, we find ourselves in a liquor store. But our third, or if we're going backwards, our 8th biggest hand is actually going to be happening at the Hard Rock Hollywood. Let's get into this one as, again, one of the craziest spots of my life. I should stop saying that because all of these obviously are.
This next hand does need a little bit of backstory, so bear with me, buckle up as I try to explain the best I can a little bit of the backstory. I'm actually playing in this pretty big game, and I mentioned over to the gentleman on my right jokingly that because I made that big bluff with the pocket fives against Mariano, I now have to balance my range out by getting some value hands in there. I can't just keep bluffing and expect to be a profitable player, so I need to have some value. Anyways, we look down at ace-5 suited here from under the straddle. We make it $150. It folds all the way to that straddle player who I was joking along with, and he decides to make the call. And let's tune in and see if you can hear me talking to him.
I remember value. I know value. I know. I swear to God.
I swear to God. Dude, you know it's a good poker game when they say, I swear to God.
After a little bit of friendly banter, we go off to a flop that comes as great and as picture perfect as possible. The flop comes 9-8-5 with 2 hearts and a diamond out there. We flop the nut flush draw as well as a pair. We decide to c-bet for $200, and my opponent pretty quickly decides to make the call. The turn comes an unbelievable king of hearts. We now have turned the nuts somehow. When he checks it over to me, it's time that we get as much money as we can into the middle. And I bet $600, which is a pretty massive sizing. And again, he thinks that we're supposed to be going for value, or maybe is that a leveling war that we have now set. My opponent goes deep into the tank before deciding on just a call. We have ended up on this river, hoping for a brick, no pairing the board, no straight flush cards out there, and we got exactly what the doctor ordered. It's a jack of spades, and I almost instantly jam all
I know you're going to go all in.
Big and it's nice. Yeah.
for $5,400. $5,400. The bet on the turn was $600. We have gone nearly 3x the size of the pot with this river jam. I'm targeting a very specific range. I believe that my opponent has a flush. I'm almost certainly positive that he has a flush, and if he doesn't, there is no way in hell that with this board run out, he'd be calling with anything weaker than a set, or maybe specifically a hand like King Jack suited or something like that. So when we get to this river, I just think he has to have a flush or a really strong set. He goes deep into the tank, and I am not exaggerating. I'm going to play it in fast forward. He goes into the tank for over 7 minutes, and we're not really at the stake level where calling the clock is a frequent thing or something that's ever comes up. There's very little talk going on. He is talking to himself, but in these stakes, my goal is to never say anything in a spot this big. This is a massive spot for me, and if he calls, this will be the largest pot I've ever played in my entire life, and will take me out of the hole pretty significantly and book a pretty profitable win if he makes the call. After an unbelievable tanking session, my opponent ultimately decides on the call. We flip over ace-5 of hearts, and he shows me queen-deuce of hearts. He had the second nuts and tanked for over 7 minutes. Oh my goodness. The table is going crazy, and as you can see from this film here, Rampage was able to get all of the footage from his angle. Oh my goodness. Let's go.
Okay, currently having some hot, what is shabu shabu? Boom, got it. I'm cultured. Anyways, this next hand is the first and only time you'll see me playing pocket aces in this top 10 list. I'm kind of proud of it. I don't just sit around waiting for aces and kings to build up big pots. This one is the one exception. Let's roll the clip at the bike, live at the bike live stream.
Either way, this very next hand is a very interesting one, as there's a straddle on, and Dr. H from Under the Gun opens to 325. We're next to act with pocket aces, and considering how many people are behind me to act, I do have to size up a tad bit. Don't have to go as big as 4x, but somewhere in the middle of 3 and 4x seems fine. I make it $1,100 to go with the American Airlines pocket aces. No shout out to American Airlines, as they have a pretty crummy loyalty system. Anyways, don't need to go down that tangent. It folds back over to Dr. H, who decides to make the call. We're going off to a flop that comes 6-5-4 rainbow. It is very, very important to learn how to mix checks here on these board textures. I have pocket aces. I'm literally not worried about any turn card, really. I'm going to call, even if a 7 or a 3 comes on the turn, I have to call at least one bet. So I can't be worried about that. And the other thing I should mention is that ranges are fairly narrow here. He can have the nut advantage on this board. I'm never going to be 3-betting with 6s, 5s, or 4s. Maybe 7, 8 suited sometimes from early position, but more than likely he has those hands. So I'd rather check to play some pot control, which I do. Check it back. And we're going off to a turn card that comes of 4 spades.
Turn checks back pocket aces. Tough board for aces, really. Now he's going to start firing with his aces up. I expect Dr. H to call at least one here.
I'm going to go ahead and bet here for value. I bet $1,000 going fairly small into this pot of $2,400. Going less than a half the size of the pot. Even $800 would have probably been better. Our opponent decides to make the call here. We're going off to a river card that comes another 4. We now make a top boat. This is a beautiful sight to see, even more so when my opponent checks it over to me. At this point, I start thinking about sizings, and I feel like considering the perfect bet that I made on the turn to set up a 1-to-1 stack to pot ratio jam on the river, I end up jamming it all in.
Zach drills it. We got Kieran all in with pocket aces here.
$4,500 to go. My opponent's the effective stack, and he goes deep into the tank. Dr. H has been known to make a pretty reasonable fold in the past, but he's also known to overcall in these spots. Either way, by jamming here, I put my opponent in a bind, and moreover, I think that my opponent has a hand like 10s, 9s, 7s, a bunch of random holdings like that. Either way, after a brief tank, my opponent ends up throwing in a time bank chip to extend his timer and eventually making the call. Another massive pot shipped in my direction, nearly a $14,000 pot. I've played my first and probably second or third biggest pot of my life tonight, and they've both gone in my favor. That's just the epitome of what it's like playing live poker in LA, I guess. Things just get big fast, and today I was just running well.
Well, it just couldn't be a proper poker vlog without including some bomb pot madness. This next hand takes place at the Resorts World with a good friend of the vlog, none other than Mariano. Massive pot here, really excited to show you, and let's hop into 6 or 7. I'm really bad at counting.
This next hand is quite the pickle, and I can't wait for you guys to see it, as it is some really high level poker. Bear with me, because it is a bomb pot, so there's a lot to go over. This is a bomb pot. It happens every dealer change. Tip, as well as the collection, or the rake, I guess you guys may refer to it as, is, you know, picked up at this point, or collected. And we all agree to do a $50 blind. We go all, whatever, 8 or 9 ways to a flop in a bomb pot situation. And we're playing double board PLO. So like I said, there's a lot of action here, so bear with me. The flop on both boards come out as following. The top board comes King of Hearts, 10 of Diamonds, King of Spades. And the bottom board comes Queen of Spades, 7 of Hearts, 8 of Diamonds. At this point, the small blind decides to lay up for $100. Mariano in the big blind makes the call. I find myself in middle position. At this point, I look down at my hand, which is King of Clubs, 4 of Hearts, Jack of Clubs, and Jack of Spades. This is a pretty disgusting hand for PLO. Pretty horrible, but I do have myself an interesting situation where I do have a backdoor on the bottom board, which is the backdoor nut straight. And I do have trips with a reasonable kicker on the top board. Folding might be okay, I think, but considering the bet is so small, it's like 1/8 the size of the pot. I end up making the call here, as there's a chance we can get lucky, or at least blast off on later, turns or rivers if we're capable of doing so. The button makes the call as well, and we're going 4 ways off to a turn card that on the top board comes the 3 clubs, and on the bottom board comes the ace of spades. This now becomes really interesting, as again, we add some equity on the bottom board, adding a gut shot to the nuts here, and on the top board we still find ourselves with 3 kings and a jack kicker. Anyways, at this point the action checks over to me, and at this point I think I actually want to turn my hand into kind of a merge, or somewhat of a bluff. The reason being is I block a king here. There's only one other king available out there. Sure, there can be some other big hands, but when the action checks over to me, I end up deciding to bet the size of the pot. The straddler thinks about it for a moment before eventually making the fold. The small blind tanks for a bit and also makes the fold, so our plan seems to be according to plan, until Mariano decides to raise to $3,000. This is now a pretty crummy situation, as there's a ton of draws on both boards, but to be fair, there's just too many draws, I think, to just make the fold at this exact juncture. This is definitely a hero call on the turn, and I have to be worried that with only $4,000 behind going to the river, if I make the call, I'm going to have to put it all in against one of the strongest players I played against to date. And we're going off to river card after we make the call. On the top board, it comes a 9 of Hearts. On the bottom board, it comes a 6 of Diamonds. Not a great situation, as we don't improve on either board. But after a bit of thinking, Mariano decides to jam $4,000, because that's all we have left. He has the table covered, specifically me covered in this hand, and that's all that matters. There's so much money in the middle, as you guys can see. Thousands and thousands of dollars. The question I have now is that obviously I'm playing one board, and is my hand good enough on that board? The really scary thing can easily become is if my opponent has specifically a holding like 10-9 with pocket 10s 9x, he would have pretty much the nuts on both boards. He'd be able to scoop me. He'd have a boat on the top board, and on the bottom board, he would have rivered a straight. There's a lot to be worried about, to be honest. And this is obviously a hero call. I don't play enough of PLO to know if this is a good or bad hand, but from the little bit I understand is I have a pretty shitty hand. And what's even more worrisome is that I'm holding a hand that I don't think is that good. I have 2 jacks, which makes it less likely for my opponent to be bluffing with queen jack and a 10 or something like that. It's just really, really scary. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and it's unfortunate because I think Mariano is good enough to turn some hands into bluffs, or more importantly, turn the nuts or a really strong hand on one board into a bluff, and if he's blocking 110, I could definitely see him really going for gusto. After one of the longest tanks I've had in live poker, pretty much in my entire life, I'm definitely writhing in pain, if that's the correct word. If not, then forgive me, I didn't go to college or I'm a dropout. It's severe, it hurts, but I'm only human. I end up making the hero call, and Mariano flashes over his hand, ace, ace, 9, 4. We are unbelieved from a crazy situation, as Mariano was able to churn on the bottom board top set, which is the effective nuts there. And yeah, outstanding play by him. He put me in a really tough spot. Luckily for us, we're able to chop this massive pot. You know, well over $12,000 or $13,000 in this pot, I believe. You know, unbelievable play by him. Got lucky enough that, you know, I was able to make the call there. Either way, really high level poker. And yeah, one of my more favorite hands I've ever played in my life. And definitely one of the most exciting hands we've played to the vlog, you know, to date on the vlog. Again, huge props to him.
Brought the dogs out to say hello. Anyways, every single pot is over the price of $15,000. Even the doggos can't believe it. Let's enjoy this one as it's an absolute monster playing here at the private game here. Ace King, will it hurt us? Will it help us? You'll have to see to believe.
Alright, so this next hand ends up being a massive one, and my phone had died as it was happening. But, as you guys will see, I end up catching the footage with my other phone as it's going on. I didn't realize the other phone was dead. You get what I'm trying to say. Let's hop into the hand. There's a straddle on at this point. $50 is the new price of poker. I'm in the button. I decided to raise to 150 with Ace King offsuit. The straddler decides to throw out the old 3-bet to $450. And with the action on me, I think we can go several ways here. 4-betting makes a ton of sense, but we're kind of really deep here. I mean, whether we realize it or not, we're playing like 200 big blinds effective. So I think just calling is actually pretty reasonable. We're going off to a flop that comes ace 6-5 rainbow. With the action on our opponent, he decides to bet out a massive whopping $1,000. Kind of a little bit worrisome, but this sizing is so massive that I just don't think it's ever going to be aces, sixes, or fives. Our opponent is doing something interesting. Why not just compound on interesting behavior by making a stupid one by raising here for whatever reason? I make a raise to $2,500 and our opponent snap raises all in here. When I was raising, before I was even able to speak through my thought process, I was snap jammed in my face. I just thought that I can get a lot of money from a hand like ace queen here. Ace queen suited makes a ton of sense. I think our opponent can definitely get carried away with that. Yeah, I don't think this line is ever going to be taken by a hand like pocket aces. So I have a pretty easy call here. And this is shaped up somehow into being a ridiculously $15,000 pot. We realize pretty quickly that we have the same freaking hand. So pretty anticlimactic, a massive pot that would have really shifted me in a whole different hemisphere. But at the end of the day, it's nice that we didn't run into it because I feel like we've been running into it a lot. And we're going to go ahead and take a nice little chop pot. Everyone loves a chop pot, right?
Sitting down, getting ready to do another podcast. But before I do that, in this following hand, we're going back, revisiting our favorite private home game that we've ever been to. It's a bomb pot, but it's the no limit holdem variety, and it's still double board. Buckle up because this one is an absolute roller coaster. Let's get into it.
This next hand is an absolute doozy, so buckle up as it's yeah, this is crazy. Anyways, we are in a $100 bomb pot, 10-handed. 10-handed, so I don't know how to bluff in these spots, but it's going to be unlikely being 10-handed. Anyways, it's a double board, regular no limit holdem bomb pot. And we go off to a top board that comes queen 7-3 with 2 spades, and a bottom board that comes jack 8-6 with 2 spades as well. So there are obviously 2 spade draws out there for one of our 9 other opponents to have. And with the action checked over to me, surprisingly, I have a monster. I looked on a queen jack. And look, I don't want to pretend like I know a ton about this game of double board, no limit, PLO, or no limit bomb pots, whatever the hell this shit's called. But what I do know is that top and top pair is pretty solid. So I decide to bet here for $600. Mariano to my direct left makes the call, and an early position player calls as well. We're going off to a turn card. I'm looking to dodge quite a bit of spades here, or random straighty cards, and the turn on the top board comes a 10 of clubs. On the bottom board, it comes a 9 of clubs. All right, this pot is a Bruin. There's nearly $3,000 already in the middle. And with the action checked over to me once again, I feel like betting here with value makes sense. I now pick up a gut shot on one of the boards, and moreover, it's just unlikely for there to be a ton of combinations of holdings I lose to. The only specific hand that I lose to in this case would be queen 10, and yeah, we would get absolutely destroyed by that hand. Otherwise, I feel like we're pretty confident and still betting for value. So I go ahead and bet for $1,700. Mariano makes a call once again, and the early position player calls once again. So not out of the woods yet, but I feel like we would have definitely heard from Queen 10 by now. We're going off to river once again, looking to fade the faded spades, and it does, as it comes on the top board, a jack of diamonds and a deuce of clubs. All right, we now pick up top pair on a board that we can no longer lose to Queen 10 to, so it'd be really hard to get scooped now. I think technically it'd be impossible in most fashions, so we're feeling pretty great. Either way, with the action on me, I feel like I can still bet from value, as once again, it's hard to be beat on both boards. In this instance, I decide to bet $3,700 after it is checked to me with almost 8,000 in the middle. I feel like if I go any bigger, I'd scare away a ton of value, and if I go any smaller, it'd just be goofy. Mariano thinks about it for a moment before inevitably making a pretty solid fold. He would later tell me that he folded 10-3 of spades, so he actually had 2 pair on one board, and he did brig out, obviously, didn't end up catching any of the spades. The early position player is still in this hand, and he eventually makes the call. We table our hand, and it is in fact good on both boards. Nearly a $16,000 pot heading in our direction. It looks like it may be Christmas in July, as we have finally found ourselves with a massive pot heading in our direction. Man, I forgot what that sensation felt like, but hopefully it doesn't go away.
Continuing along, continuing to progress, and this next hand, it would not be a complete compilation without pocket jiggities being involved. This one takes place live at the bike, in the biggest stakes I've ever played, in the most successful session I've ever had. So let's see what the hell happened.
So we're looking in a pretty interesting situation when under the gun by the name of Eric decides to raise to $300 because we now have the $100 straddle on, and it's pretty much going to be a constant for most of the session. So just beware, the stakes are getting massive, really big. Folds all the way to me, which I am in the straddle, and we look down at pocket jacks. This is a great situation for many reasons. Most importantly, that I can have a 3-bet here that's not junk. We now have a value hand. I go ahead and make it $1,100 because I am out of position. To be quite frank, $1,200 probably makes more sense, as that we are out of position for the entirety of the hand. Either way, we're going to go ahead and get called from our opponent. Out of position, heading to a flop that comes 8-4-4 rainbow. Pretty outstanding flop for our specific holding. The only thing that we do have to mention is here, it's very unlikely for our opponent to be hitting this flop, besides pocket 8s and maybe 1 or 2 combos of ace-4 suited. I think for the most part, my opponent's going to have 9s, 10s, ace-queen, ace-jack, and ace-10 suited. If that's the case, I got to go really small here. The pot is around $2,300. I'm going to go for a third or fourth size the bet here. I make it $800 to go, right in that perfect sweet spot. My opponent decides to make the call. As you guys can see, he has ace-queen here. He's floating with just ace-high, and the turn card is a miracle jack of clubs. We were ahead, but, I mean, for me at this point, I don't know his holding, obviously. I've now got to target what I believe is a flush draw or an overly bluffed situation. I think by checking here, I allow my opponent to really take over the reins of the hand, and I show a ton of weakness. My hands like ace-king, ace-queen, ace-jack, ace-10, king-queen, king-jack, all pretty much give up here and possibly float depending on his sizing. So I decide to tank check it over to him. He takes the bait and bets $1,500. Obviously, I think raising would be a complete misplay of the hand, so I think about it for a moment before deciding on just making the call. The river is a beautiful 5 of hearts, changing nothing to the board texture. I have the effective nuts in my heart, and at this point, the only possible way I make any more money is by deciding to check it over to my opponent. And as you guys can see, that was the perfect play, or at least in this instance, it was. Like I said, I let him hang himself, and he does, to the tune of an all-in. Just shy of $5,000, we beat him into the pot. I let him know immediately that we do have ourselves a set of jacks that turned into a beautiful boat on the turn here. The biggest pot of my life, that was it right there. And it's really fascinating to see it back in real time. Unbelievable. I'm overwhelmed in emotions, but I'm keeping my poker face on. 17,000 American US dollars. Shout out to inflation, as I don't even know what that's worth now, but man, what a sight to see. That was an absolute barn burner.
Just now getting to work, and one thing I realized is top 2. Welcome to the top 2. This next hand takes place on episode 81 at the private game at the bike, which ends up being, you'll see. I don't want to spoil it. Let's get into that next hand.
To be totally honest, to this point, the session has gone, without many hiccups. We have been playing bomb pots what feels like every 20 minutes. It is of the no limit hold'em variety, which is definitely not my favorite. If we're doing bomb pots, I think it kind of makes you want to gamble. It's just unfortunate when you only have 2 cards and there's 2 boards. It's kind of hard to make big hands on both boards. Anyways, I guess that's the point of it. We find ourselves in a really interesting situation when we're going 8 or 9 ways to a flop in a bomb pot, and there's quite a bit to go over. We find ourselves in the big blind, 2 flops that come ace queen 7 high and king 10-4. There is a flush draw available on the top board and a rainbow board texture on the bottom board. I decide to lead out here for a pretty reasonable sizing. I decide to lead out for $200, considering I do have top 2 pair on one of the boards and a gut shot to the nuts on the other board. It folds all the way to the button, who's a very fun player to say the least, and somebody that I took great liking to very on the session. This guy is outstanding. Don't want to say anybody's names, but I really like this guy a lot. Anyways, he decides to raise to $1,700, a really, really massive sizing. At this point, I have around 6,000 or 6,500, excuse me, behind, and I guess I could just call, but if there's some chance that I think I can get my opponent to fold a little bit of equity on that bottom board, which I have only a gut shot on, then I think I got to take my options here by just jamming and getting him to fold a little bit of a better hand on one of the boards. To be quite honest, I hardly play bomb pot, no limit situations. I don't know how to play it. There's no strategy for me. I just genuinely, I just really don't know. Anyways, when it gets back over to me, I end up doing what is the unthinkable and jamming for right around $7,500 in a bomb pot that I've been playing super conservatively to this point. I haven't got even past the flop on any of these bomb pots. But against his raise sizing and considering I can maybe get a better hand on the bottom four to fold, and this time I find myself all in, or what is one of the biggest pots of my life, my opponent pretty quickly makes a call, and we end up making a mess of the situation as we decide to run it twice. And when you run it twice, that means we're running what in reality is 4 runouts, because there's 2 boards here. Anyways, you're going to have to follow along with me as there is a lot to go past. The turn on the top board comes a jack of clubs. The second top board run out comes out a deuce of clubs. On the bottom board, the first turn comes out a queen, and the second turn comes out a 9. Going back to the top board, the first river is an 8, and the second river is another jack. On the bottom board, one river comes out a 7, and the final river comes out a 5. My opponent chose my worst nightmare. King 10. Oh my god. I just got scooped in the biggest pot of my life against a hand that I'd be chopping with 99 out of 100 times. My opponent hit the gut shot twice, so he hit 2 out of his 3 outs, 2 of them on the 2 run outs. Oh my gosh. I am honestly shaken at this point, and I'm probably gonna need to just get a little walk going at this time and just kind of figure this all out, because that was a lot to handle.
Wow.
So what's that age? I have 4, 6, 7, like 8,000.
Yeah, you got me covered.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's it.
Well, without further ado, we have officially reached the #1 biggest pot I've ever played in my life. We're heading back to that private game, playing the biggest stakes of my life, so it only makes sense and it's correlated that we're playing the biggest pot of my life. Well, welcome to the very last hand of the video, and this is such a last hand of the session that my phone had died. As you guys saw in the last video, there was no video of the hand history, but this hand ended up being a big one, so I just brought my other phone out just to record it. And here we go. We're playing 4 or 5 hand at this point. Cutoff makes it 150. The button calls, and I'm in the small blind with ace queen of diamonds. I end up 3-betting here to $600. And the cutoff 4 bets, which is the first 4 bet I've seen him do all day, to 2,100. Okay, obviously red, lights going off, alarm bells, but I don't think I can fold a hand this strong, so I make the call. We're going off to a flop that comes queen 10 for rainbow. Well, I flopped top pair, unlikely that I'm ever folding now. I check it over to my opponent. He bets about half pot for 2,400. Never folding. I flop top, so I make the call, and we're going off to a turn card that comes at 3 of diamonds. I check over to my opponent once again, and at this point, he ends up jamming for $5,425. Is there a world where my opponent can have the same hand as me? I think so.
Is there a world where my opponent can turn ace king into a bluff? I'd hope so. Is there an opponent that exists out there that maybe would just punt off with pocket jacks? Maybe. But you have to ask yourself, Kieran, is this that opponent? And I'm be totally honest with you guys. No. No, he's not. At least not in today's session. But at the time, considering the simple fact that I have so much money in this pot already, I'd be calling 5,000 to win 15 or 20K, whatever the hell the math works out to. So I just can't muster up fold. So I end up making the call with top. Our opponent asks if we can run it twice. We agree, obviously. We oblige. The first run out comes out with a jack of hearts, which is not great because now I lose to even ace, king, and pocket jacks. And the second run out comes the 5 of clubs. Doesn't change too much. Our opponent lets us know pretty quickly that he has pocket kings. And just like that, our massive session, we were up nearly $14,000, is obliterated on the very, very last hand of the entire game. I'm going to be honest with you guys, this one stung really bad. I've been running so fucking badly in poker. And sure, we can accredit that to some really bad play. I've been really open and honest about it. But when I feel like I bring my A game and it's still just not good enough, it's frustrating. Sure, we could have probably got away from that last hand by not 3-betting, I guess, pre-flop, which would have been kind of stupid if I didn't. But maybe not calling the 4-bet makes sense, and maybe not calling the churn jam. I really don't know. It's easy to beat yourself up in hindsight. I don't want to crucify myself over a mistake that I think is pretty nominal at best. It's pretty, like, whatever. But I'm going to treat this little part as a monologue, just to be open and honest with you guys. Things have been rough. I've just been incapable of catching any runouts in my favor. When we're massive favorites, we end up losing. When we're big dogs, we just stay losing. It feels like everyone I know is in the same realm. Some other of your favorite poker vloggers are also going through it. And yeah, just, I'm just going to try to be nice. Hopefully you guys can be as well. And just hopefully you guys can wish me some run good or some fire in the comment section, because at this point I'm in desperate need of it. Things just haven't been going my way, and I'm excited to see things turn out in better favor. Either way, I'm talking like I'm stuck $1 billion in this game. We ended up winning small, but let's talk a little bit more about that in the post-game interview. It was quite fun going down memory lane. It's been a really long time since I've really sat down and really have dived that far deep into the poker hands. I usually just kind of leave it in the background. At the end of the year, we'll look at the number, and it reignited some of the pain of the big ones that we lost. Same thing, reignited the happiness and the joy, the jubilation from some of the biggest pots I've ever won in my life, obviously. So all that being said, can't wait to play more poker in this next coming year. 2023 will only bring success, and I'm really excited for the direction that Close to Broke is going right now, and the entire poker space with all of the really successful live streams, a ton of other successful poker vloggers. I think I'll definitely find my niche in all this, and I think with only time, things will continue to progress. My family's been super supportive and behind me, and more importantly, I have a really good support cast that is allowing me to find a little bit of an easier way to transition into playing poker a little more often. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure that you click the like button, comment, and subscribe as well. It goes a really long way in allowing other people that have never maybe heard of Close to Broke, maybe they can find the video in that fashion. Either way, for everyone that is curious, for the rest of the year, we'll probably be slowing down as far as poker playing. You can still expect 2 videos a week, but for the most part, no meetup games on the horizon, stuff like that. Either way, hope you guys have a lovely day. Stay happy, stay healthy. More importantly, guys, don't go to the tables. Deuces.